Solve. If no method is stated, you may use the one of your choice. The first one tells us we need to do completing the square. So how did we do it on the previous page? Remember that this middle term is 2 times, because we're looking at something of the form a plus a number quantity squared in this case. Before it was x plus a, where a represented our number, but a is our variable here. And when we multiply this out, we get a squared plus 2 times that number times a plus the number squared. So 2 times that number is going to equal this 10, and so the number will equal 1/2 of 10, or 5. We're going to square that number to get 25. So when we do this, we'll write a squared plus 10a. First thing we're doing is moving over that negative 35 to the other side. This number is going to be added in on both sides, so we'll have plus 25 plus 25. The left side factors to a plus 5 quantity squared equals negative 10. Take the square root of both sides. Remember, when you're taking your square root, always have your plus or minus. So we have a plus 5 equals plus or minus I root 10, or a equals negative 5 plus or minus I root 10, and we're done. Make sure the square root extends over the whole 10. The next one's a very interesting problem in that there's multiple ways to go about it, and the one that students typically pick is they want to square that out and multiply the right side out, move everything to one side, get 0, and then factor it. While that can be done, it's definitely not the easiest way, and there's a lot of mistakes that can be made. Take a careful look at these two. What do you notice about them? They're the exact opposite in sign. If I factor out a negative 1 from this side, I'll have negative 5a times, so if I'm taking out a negative, that's going to switch the signs. It'll be negative 3 plus 4a, or in other words, 4a minus 3. Now when we look at this, we can see that I have the same factor in both of those. I still need to get 0 on one side. Never, ever, ever divide out a variable. When I add this to the other side, this negative will become positive. Now, similar to if I had something like 2x squared plus 2ax, I would have a greatest common factor of x. I could take it out and it would be 2x plus 2a. Actually, let me change this to a 5, because otherwise I could take out that 2 as well. Similarly, I can take out the greatest common factor here as a 4a minus 3. So I'll be left with, this is 4a minus 3 times 4a minus 3 will give me the 4a minus 3 squared, plus 4a minus 3 times what gives me the second one, 5a. Now I can multiply all this stuff out. I'll just write this one down. We'll have 8a minus 6 plus 5a equals 0. Set each factor equal to 0. And I'm going to simplify this at the same time. 8a plus 5a will give me 13a minus 6 equals 0. Solve each one. A is 3/4. Over here, a is 6/13. So we have a solution set there of 6/13, comma 3/4. Next one. This one is a little different because it has variables in the denominator. Whenever you see that, what you should do is work on the restrictions for this. This is y minus 1 times y plus 1. So what numbers would give us a 0 on the bottom? Y cannot equal 1 or negative 1 in this problem. Once we have that, what we want to do is get rid of all the variables in the denominator. We want to multiply by the least common denominator of all the fractions. So we're going to multiply by y minus 1, y plus 1 to every single term. You have to be very careful about this negative there. That type, when you have a negative there, it gives a lot of people some trouble. And it's easy to make a mistake. I'm emphasizing what I'm doing here so you can see that, and it's clear exactly where I get this next line. So on this side, those all reduce, and I'm left with 2. Over here, I'm left with negative y times y minus 1, which will give me negative y squared plus y. And on this side, the y minus 1's reduce, and I'm left with y squared plus y. The y squareds go away. We're left with 2y equals 2, so y equals 1. So our answer is y equals 1? No, remember our restriction over here. Y cannot equal 1, which means there is no solution. You can write that as this symbol, which means empty set. You could write it as bracket with nothing in it, and close the bracket. Never use this symbol as a 0. It's not 0, it means empty set. Another thing about when you have a rational equation like this is you need to make sure you always check. Always check to see if that works, and that's what we're doing right here. We're comparing it. If we state our restrictions and then we compare the answer we get to our restriction, we should be okay. Next one. The next one looks kind of funny because it has i's in it. So let's see. We're not going to be factoring this. That would be a little bit difficult at this point. We could do completing the square, but that would also be hard. Let's use a quadratic formula. X equals, remember here, a will be I, b will be negative 3, and c will be negative 2i. So it's negative b, or negative of negative 3. It's the opposite of negative 3, so it's 3, plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared, which would be 9, minus 4 times I times negative 2i. All over 2 times a, or 2i. So we have 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 8i squared over 2i. And remember, I squared is negative 1. So 8 times negative 1 would be negative 8. 9 minus 8, we'll have 3 plus square root of 1 over 2i, or 3 plus or minus 1 over 2i, which will give us 4 over 2i, or 2 over 2i. And this will reduce to 2 over I. We need to rationalize this, so we'll multiply by I over I. And then we can reduce this out 2 and a 1. So we'll have 2i over negative 1, or in other words, negative 2i. And on the other side, we'll multiply by I over I. So we're left with, well, actually, that can reduce right away. We're just going to be left with I over negative 1, or negative I. And that's it. The last one. Whenever you see a square root of a variable, what you have to do is isolate that term. Now it's okay to have a number in front of it, but we don't want to have plus or minus some number, because our goal right now is to get rid of the square root. what can I do that would get rid of this square root? I can square both sides. So when I square this, I get 2 squared, 4, square root is x squared is x, equals, remember x minus 8 quantity squared means x minus 8 times x minus 8, which gives us x squared minus 16x plus 64. Let's get 0 on one side. So when we subtract that, we'll get negative 20x plus 64. Now we say what two numbers multiply to give us 64 but add to give us negative 20. We know it's x and x in the first spot, and that'll be 4 and 16. So we put a minus and a minus. X minus 4 equals 0, x minus 16 equals 0, x equals 4, or x equals 16. Now what you have to do here is you must check. Every time you have the square root with a variable inside, you need to check. So when we do this, x equals 4, we'll get 2 times root 4. Does this equal 4 minus 8? 2 times 2 equals negative 4. Remember, we're checking the original equation. That is false. X equals 4 is not a solution. When we check x equals 16, we get 2 times root 16 equals 16 minus 8. 2 times 4 equals 8. Yes, that checks out. So our solution, there's only one answer to this problem, and that answer is 16.